Hey, welcome to Q&A, where you ask your questions on faith and life, and I do my best to give a biblical perspective. Well, we are into the home run up to Christmas. It's only another couple of weeks, so if you've got questions on faith and life, get them in on slido.com, use the hashtag ALC23. We'd love to hear from you. But let's jump into today's question. Why do cessationists say that the gifts of the Holy Spirit aren't for today? Good question. If you're not familiar with cessationists or cessationism, it's essentially the belief that the sign gifts in particular, we're talking about prophecy, miracles, tongues, healing, those sorts of things, that these gifts have ceased. That's not to say that they believe all gifts have ceased, but that those sign gifts have ceased. Why have they ceased? Well, it has to do with the closing of the canon, the formation of what we call a New Testament. Remember in the book of Acts, in chapter 1, verse 8, we're told that the Holy Spirit was given to us to empower us with, for example, sign gifts, prophecy, tongues, healing, miracles, those things, in order to make us witnesses, to empower us to be witnesses to Jesus. And so while the early church was under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, was using these gifts to bear witness to Jesus, to establish the church, to grow the kingdom, we have, at the same time as that's happening, we have people writing letters. We have Paul sending his letters out as he establishes churches. We have the Gospels being records being written down towards the end of his life. We have John looking back and writing his epistles. We have the book of Revelation. And so while the gifts are in operation to bring the church to establish the church, these letters start circulating, and there comes a point where the church decides, we've got all these letters. Some we believe are inspired in ways that others aren't. What are we going to use? What's in, what's out? And they have these councils, and they come to a point where they decide what books are going to form the New Testament, which ones aren't. So we get the ones that we're familiar with, the Gospels, Paul's letters, Peter's letters, and on it goes. And you have others that we're not so familiar with, like the Gospel of Thomas and others, who said, not so much. And that process was where they came out with that definitive list was when we called the closing of the canon, the establishment of the New Testament. Now, the significance of that is that essentially, the cessationists say the gifts were given to establish a church by bearing witness to Jesus. Now we have the Bible, and that bears witness to Jesus. The Old Testament points to Jesus. The letters we now have in the Gospels and the New Testament bear witness to that. We don't need these sign gifts. Now, so essentially, that's what cessationists are. That's why they say the gifts aren't for today. Now, that's not to say they don't believe that these gifts don't operate. It's how they operate. So, for example, in the New Testament, Peter would lay hands on someone, they'd be healed because he had a gift of healing. Today, if I was to lay hands on you and you are healed, it's not because I have a gift of healing, it's because God answered a prayer for healing. So in essence, that's what the cessationists believe, and that's why. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have what we call the continuationists. And these are essentially those who believe that the Holy Spirit continues to operate today as he did back then, that the sign gifts are still in evidence and in operation today as they were back then for the same reasons, to bear witness to Jesus. Now, on that note, it brings us to why many people are cessationists, not because of their official doctrine, we don't need him because of the gifts because we have the Bible now, but because of the way the gifts are used today. So many of people that I experience in my interaction with people who are cessationists, they are cessationists because they look at the way that some of the sign gifts are being manifest today, and they're just going, thanks, but no thanks. They look at the excesses of the way that people are using them to create a platform for themselves, draw attention to themselves. And remember in Acts 1:8, they were there given so that we might be empowered to be a witness to Jesus. And now we see people, not going to mention names, but they draw attention to themselves and the way they conduct themselves. It's actually taking away from Jesus. So people say, maybe they're not for today. Maybe we just need the Bible. And so they pull back. rather than sort of say, well, okay, well, maybe there's another issue, not the gifts, but the person, and we need to deal with that. So yeah, so I actually believe I'm a continuist. I believe that the gifts still operate today for the same reasons that they did back then, to empower us to be witnesses. Paul says in 2 Timothy 1:7 that we've not received the spirit of fear or timidity, but of power, love, and self-discipline. And that power is the power of the Holy Spirit to bring his kingdom to bear by bearing witness to Jesus in very real ways. Now, the reason I hold that view is that I think that why would God withdraw some of the means of bearing witness to him when the world needs it? Why would he hamper the church and its effectiveness of demonstrating the power of God, his kingdom come among us, an integral part of which is signs and wonders. So I believe very much. Now, that doesn't mean to say that everybody who administers or ministers in the power of the Holy Spirit is mature in their faith, is mature in their character. They have character flaws and everything else. But I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. If God could speak through a donkey, as he did through Balaam's donkey, then he can speak through you and I today as well. He can perform miracles through you and I today for the same reasons, to bear witness to himself. People can argue with the scriptures and twist them all sorts of ways, but when the sign gifts are in operation, it's another matter. So yeah, it's what I think is important to recognise. So that's why cessationists say that the gifts are not for today. I believe they are. I think that we do need to humble ourselves, but you need to come to a view yourself. I could give you a whole lot of scriptures for and against. I encourage you to search the scriptures for yourself. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Hey, as I said at the beginning, if you've got questions, jump over to Slido. We've got another couple of weeks. But that's it for now. Until next time, God bless.